Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so glad that you're here. Before we jump in, I just want to say my name is Marcia Questel. I'm a BCBA. I've been working with children with special needs for just about 20 years. It started when I was volunteering in a program collecting data and working with early intervention for children with autism. So it's just been everything that I've always loved to do. I never looked back after that and have just pursued any education and opportunities of employment to continue to do that, because it is remarkable what we can do with science to help anybody learn, right? I know that behaviorists like to talk about this in terms of anybody, anywhere, anything, right? That behavior science can help anybody pursue their goals and really measure if those goals are being attained or not. So this presentation is through a behavior analytic lens, but also I have a wealth of experience in school settings. So I have a really good grasp of what teachers experience and how difficult it can be to create class-wide strategies that really work for a vast array of learners in one room. I know that, you know, as we have progressed across time from early special education to now, we are becoming more and more inclusive and trying to make sure that the things that we are teaching and the opportunities we're providing really work for everyone. So with that being said, let's get started. So how to get the BACB CEUs. During the presentation, we will give 3 keywords. Please make note of the keywords when we give them. They will not be repeated, okay? So if you're getting CEUs either now live or in the recording when this is put on YouTube, you should write them down right away. Well, especially if you're doing it live. If you're watching the recording, you can rewind it. But make sure that you write them down here today, because you'll need to show that you attended the entire time. And if you missed one, then you'll have a chance to get it on the YouTube video when it's posted in a few days. So this is how we meet the BACB requirement to keep track of attendance throughout the duration of the event. At the end of the workshop, you'll send those 3 keywords and your BACB certificate number. We absolutely need that, to ray@abaskills.com. And the PowerPoint slides and a certificate of attendance will be sent to you, and then you'll be able to log those CEUs. So here's an outline of our goals. It's really important to be able to read your student's IEP with greater understanding. And there's a portion of this that's directed towards parents as well, who sometimes struggle to be involved in all aspects of the IEP process and may struggle with really feeling like the goals are meaningful for their child, but also for staff, whether you be a teacher or a professional who's an outside consultant or a supportive therapist. You absolutely need to be able to read the IEPs with really deep understanding of what they mean and why they're there. So we also have to consider the big picture supports that each child in the inclusive classroom needs that can be addressed with whole class strategies. Think about response to intervention regarding behavioral and academic needs for students, and create easy to use visual displays to demonstrate growth. We also want our attendees to have a greater understanding of what they can do now to support their current students, prepare for those students' future IEP goals, and learn what works for a similar future student. So, you know, what can I do with my class right now that might, you know, intervene on some issues that I'm facing? What can I do to prepare them for next year? And also just with students that have a similar profile that might be coming in next year or the year after. And participants are encouraged to bring old or new IEP goals for their students. Of course, HIPAA compliant, no personal identifying information will be shared or displayed, in order to workshop with the group about what can be done to support present or future students. So this is for parents. okay, mostly, but also a note for teachers and professionals. Parents are vital members of the IEP team, okay? They have to be included. They are the most important person on the team outside of the individual themselves who the IEP is for. And I hope that more and more committees are including students in the CSE whenever possible, because that's a really important thing to do, especially as kids get older, but even at younger ages, there is a push to include younger students even in the CSE process to create the IEP. So according to New York State, the IEP process will strengthen the role of parents and take steps to ensure that families have meaningful opportunities to participate in the education of their children at school and at home. And this is straight from the website for New York State. Provide an important accountability tool for school personnel, students, and parents to measure students' progress towards goals and objectives, and to determine whether the school has appropriately configured how it uses its resources to reach the desired outcomes for students with disabilities, right? So accountability, that means that parents should be able to tell very easily what's being measured, how it's being measured, and why. So information provided by parents regarding their child's strengths and needs is a vital part of the evaluation and is considered in developing the IEP. Sometimes parents feel like they're not being heard. I recently wrote an article for one of our websites, and it was about this bridge that really needs to happen between staff and parents when you sit down at that meeting. It can be really emotional. It can be really stressful for parents, and I have heard many parents say that they felt like their needs were not being heard. So it is in New York State writing, right, that parents, information provided by parents regarding their child's strengths and needs is a vital part, right? It has to be heard. So all members of the committee share the responsibility to contribute meaningfully in the development of a student's IEP and to make recommendations that are based on the student's present levels of performance and in consideration of the student's strengths, needs, interests, and preferences, and the concerns of the parents for the education of their child. Okay, one moment. Hi, thanks for joining. Okay, parents, you are vital members. The student's parents must be regularly informed of their child's progress. Are the parents' concerns and the student's strengths, preferences, and interests evident in the IEP? Right, that's something that we might not always see. I think that parents feel like their concerns are not being heard. Evaluation reports are written in clear, precise, and easily understood language that is jargon-free, succinct, and provided in the language or mode of communication understood by the parent. I think in regards to translation, I think that usually a very good job is done there. But in terms of it being jargon-free and succinct, no. I think that often parents describe that they don't fully understand what is being written in the evaluation reports and maybe are just nodding and saying like, sure, I think I have an idea of what that means, just to be polite. And we need to do a better job of making sure that parents are really involved and are really encouraged to have a deep understanding of what's written there. Parent input is solicited, right? Not just welcome, but actively solicited, discussed, and given meaningful consideration in the development of the IEP. Recommendations are written in language the parents and educators can understand. What process or procedures are in place for parents and school personnel to inform the CSE if the student is not likely to meet his or her annual goals by the end of the year to consider changes to the student's IEP recommendations? So parents need to be fully aware of what they can do if the goals are not being met. So let's talk about terminology. And many people already know this, but just so that we can cover all of our bases, mastery is the duration of time plus measurement of accuracy the child needs to demonstrate a skill. And when we're talking about IEPs, they need to be very, very specific, such as 3 consecutive days at 90 to 100% independent correct responding. Less specific would be 60% success on 10 consecutive occasions. So what is the occasion? How spaced out are the occasions? Is it once a week? Is it once a month? And what does 60% success actually mean? How is it being measured, right? So we really have to be specific when we're writing IEP goals and for parents to fully understand what's happening there. Generalization, demonstrating a skill that was acquired in one setting across novel people, novel stimuli, novel locations, and across time, i.e. maintenance. So how will the skill be generalized? Often I see goals that say generalized to others or generalized across places. That doesn't tell me how it's going to be taught. How will that generalization component actually occur? So we have to make sure that we are specific even when we're talking about those components of the IEP goals. Here's an example of what IEP goals should look like, right? A lot of information, and I think everyone can agree that this isn't often what we see or always what we see when we're reading IEPs, right? There's a lot of information there about what domain this program is in or where this skill is coming from, what the annual goal is, what the baseline measure will be exactly, with whom, for how long, how the data would be collected, right? And a list of objectives, which we often do see. So be smart, all right? And this is actually your first keyword, again, that I can't repeat, so you have to write it down now, smart. Be smart about setting your goals for IEPs. And again, your first keyword is smart. To write your IEP goals, they should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. I don't think I have to explain every one of those, but attainable means that it's something in reach, in close proximity to the skills that are being displayed now, so that it's stepwise progression of skill mastery. And relevant means that it's not just something somebody else is imposing as important, but that it's relevant to the person. And time-bound means that we are not just going to let this goal sit here forever and ever, but that we're going to measure mastery within a certain amount of time so that we can intervene if something else needs to happen or graduate to the next skill level once it has been mastered. So here are a few examples. By the end of the first marking period, the learner will identify colors of items across varying stimuli in the classroom with 80% accuracy as measured by daily data collection. The learner will greet at least 3 different peers or staff by saying hello, hi, name, with eye contact in the classroom with 80% accuracy as measured by daily data collection. So again, like it's not just, greetings, will greet peers and staff. Right? It's much more specific. What will they say to whom with eye contact, where it's happening, and the data collection. And typically there would be a note saying who is collecting the data. Learner will identify emotions within pictures, both receptively by pointing and expressively, verbally labeling the emotion or vocally labeling the emotion with 80% accuracy in the classroom as measured by daily data collection. Again, very specific. Learner will utilize I feel because language when displaying upset emotions with 80% accuracy as measured per opportunity within the classroom. So with that one, right, it's not saying that this has to happen X number of times a day, it's per opportunity. So the child might not be upset every day, but we have to make sure that we are catching those opportunities and capitalizing on them to, collect that data and make sure that, hey, this child looks upset. Are they saying an I feel because statement or not? And marking that, as correct or incorrect and making sure that we're collecting accurate and consistent data. What do behavior goals look like on the IEP? Those are usually under management needs. So the learner will be provided with a token economy, utilized consistently throughout the day to reinforce on-task behaviors and correct responding. Differential reinforcement will be applied to more independent responding. So that's good. We know that this person is going to be given tokens. It's going to be given consistently through the day. It's going to reinforce, being on task and correct responding. Okay, fine. Differential reinforcement, more reinforcement for, better or more independent responding. A 3-second delay will be incorporated between delivering instructions and the learner's response to encourage scanning and processing of relevant stimuli when presented tasks at the desk. This will be reevaluated on a bi-weekly basis. So instead of prompting right away within that 3-second period, the instructor or the teacher is going to specifically wait and make sure that the student is scanning properly. This is sometimes put in place because staff can have a habit of saying, you know, something like touch blue, and like prompting right away or looking at it right away, or somehow otherwise giving a cue of what the response should be. And children catch on to those things really quickly. And then if those things aren't there and they've learned that those typically were there before, they either do not scan independently because they're waiting for some type of prompt or cue, or they will have a default response. And so we need to build in an intentional delay, not only for the learner to have the opportunity to scan, but also for the staff to know, I can't jump the gun and prompt now. I need to make sure that I count to this certain amount of time, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, to give this learner the opportunity to respond independently to kind of reduce that prompt dependency. So a log will be maintained and used to communicate between home and school. Parents and staff will indicate successes and struggles that the learner displays on a daily basis. These notes will be used for identifying situations in which learner requires support to be flexible due to a history of rigid pattern behaviors, as well as to discuss emotional vocabulary that was taught regarding the events that took place, feeling proud, upset, excited. And so this is just a note saying that, you know, we are going to consistently communicate so that we're bridging both environments, which I think is a really important thing to have in the IEP, or at least as understood between home and school, because sometimes parents report that they only hear from the teacher when something bad happens. And we really don't want that. We don't want notes going home that are upsetting all the time. It's important for parents to receive information about what did go well in the day, not only to promote conversation and recall of events as well, but also to capitalize on emotions and feelings and recall events and have a discussion about how you felt about what happened. That helps children to prepare for the next time something like that happens, and also gives them the vocabulary to shape not only their recall of that event, but shape their experience of new events, because language and experience are like a chicken and an egg, right? So there's even theories that say that what you experience is shaped by the language that you have in mind already. So it's really, really important that we make sure that we guide students to recall events accurately and utilize a eloquent language to the extent possible for that learner to describe what happened to them. What goals should not look like, okay? So just some non-examples. She will say, I want item with 80% success. How is that being collected? When is it happening? Is it upon seeing something that she wants? How do you know she wants it? This is a requesting behavior goal, but it's written very poorly, not being smart, like the acronym that we used before. He will take turns effectively during a game with 80% success over 3 occasions. That almost sounds good, but what kind of games? Is it board games? Is it, kicking outside games, kicking a ball? Who's collecting the data? What sets the occasion? How often are the occasions? Again, not specific enough. Almost there, but really not okay yet. She will add single-digit numbers together accurately across 3 assessments. What is accuracy? What does that mean? What is the score supposed to be? And how is it being assessed? How many problems are being presented? So we really are not being specific enough at all there. That's a really terrible written goal. He will greet peers and adults with 80% success over 10 occasions. So this is again a greeting goal like before, but this one's written really poorly because 10 occasions does not give me any specific time-bound information. This is 10 consecutive school days where the child is not absent, so 10 present school days in a row. And what does 80% success mean? Because how can you be 80% successful saying hi to someone? How are you scored on that? Right? So it's really poorly written again. We have to be much more specific and really showing how something is being measured. So here are some resources I find these invaluable. I recommend these to every single person that I work with that has a child with autism or related developmental difference. The National Autism Center is a long-standing, valid, and reliable resource for information regarding treatment options. So established, emerging, and unestablished are the categories that they use. Established means that across years of research, this has been proven to be effective, right? The science stands behind an established treatment. Emerging means that it could be helpful, and there's some evidence that says that it's a good treatment, but we're not quite there yet. And unestablished means that either there's not enough research at all to call it a good treatment or a valid treatment, or it's actually been proven to be harmful. So you really want to stay away from those. And at ASAT, of course, many people know that I am a content editor for ASAT, but before that, I was always such a big fan of their work, and it is such an excellent organization. Their newsletter is free, and it's once monthly, and they put out fantastic, relevant information for their readers. It's also translated into many languages, and beyond the newsletter, the website itself is absolutely incredible. There's just such a wide breadth of information for parents and professionals, and the depth is also very good. They have many resources available on the ASAT website that I do encourage parents and professionals to visit and also sign up for the newsletter. Okay, and this is a comprehensive IEP goal bank. It is amazing, and often parents and professionals don't have access to these unless you work in the school system. So it's really cool that this is available to anybody. So you can just Google it yourself. If you're getting these slides, it'll be in your PDF of the slides. Or you can send an email to Ray at abaskills.com, and he will send you the link. And it's really it's very wonderful. It's long and covers a lot of different goals with a lot of detail and very smart, good IEP goals. Okay, so some of the issues that educators face today. We have to, teachers in classrooms have to address every individual child one at a time and care for and nurture each one child. Then there are groups of children within classrooms that have, let's say, a certain set of behaviors or a certain set of challenges that, or maybe when they're together, certain things happen that can be really challenging for a teacher. Then there's the entire class, and how they're performing and behaving reflects on the teacher as a whole, right? And that is a lot of pressure, right? And we know that there's this whole trickle down thing that happens to teachers between, you know, the laws of the land, the laws of the state, the rules and regulations of the district, the nature of their school, the atmosphere of their school, and then what happens in their classroom, who the parents are, and then communication with parents, feeling connected to them, feeling that, you know, you have a good rapport with parents, and of course, burnout. There's so much pressure on teachers today to help children flourish and also to compensate for a lot of things that are not happening otherwise in these children's lives, and to act as, you know, the on their feet 24/7, 365 caretaker for these children. And when they go home, they're prepping for the next day or prepping for the next week. So it can be extremely exhausting, and it can be really overwhelming to consider new strategies that are not comfortable. But I'm really encouraging educators that are watching this to take it slow, you know, watch the YouTube recording and digest the information a bit at a time. You know, if there's some information presented today it's already mastered, great. But if there's some new information, number one, that's good, right? If you are used to your old strategies and you're still having some concerns, and that's what brought you to this video, it's great that you're encountering some new information. And number two is if you have any questions about how to utilize the information or how to make it fit your specific room, go ahead and email me, right? I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear questions and concerns that you have, or even if you have questions about how you could make it work, or if you think it doesn't work. I would really love to hear that in email, because I welcome the opportunity to support you as you try some new things. And kudos to you for wanting to try new things. So let's dive into that. I will give one example very briefly. I went to observe a child once in a classroom who was engaging in what was being called attention-seeking behavior. I saw this child who was struggling to interact, and he was attempting to play with peers, and it was like kind of a preschool setting, and they had centers, and they were constantly transitioning and moving around and playing and having fun, and it was a really, really nice setting, but his behavior was being labeled obnoxious and annoying by peers and by staff, and that's why I was called in to address these, unwanted interfering behaviors, which involve some non-compliance and some, yelling or pushing, and nothing too major, but behaviors that were unwanted. So when I went there, I saw this child get reprimanded. And let's say I was collecting data for every time he engaged in something that got attention from the staff. Let's say across a 3-hour observation, he engaged in 25 things that caused a teacher to come over, either separate him from his peer, talk to him one-on-one, give him eye contact, give him a big verbal explanation, get him on task, that kind of thing. This happened, X amount of times, 25 times. And how many times he's ever praised or prompted proactively before something happened was like 3. So I said to the staff, we need to increase that, tenfold. We need to make sure that that is happening way more than these reprimands. And their answer was, well, we can't be just paying attention to him all day, because we have so many other kids in this room, and we can't just keep focusing on him and what he needs. And I said, but you already are, like that's what you're doing. You're constantly paying attention to him, and all of the energy you're spending is wasted because it's in the wrong direction. It's in the reactive direction when behavior's already happened, rather than the proactive reaction to, get ahead of it. They didn't necessarily love that answer, but the case was that they needed better strategies. They needed to come up with ways to reinforce the things that they wanted to see, and to, extinguish and treat the things that they didn't want to see. But instead, it was just this continuous application of attention for, behaviors that they wished wouldn't happen. So when we talk about functions of behavior, I want to say it's not all for attention, but here's this popular image among educators. I can't do this anymore. Okay, let's get back to work, seriously. But some common functions of behavior that we discuss are medical, like, is anything going on with this kid? Is there hormones? Is there illness, exhaustion, not sleeping well? Something, biomedical, like I know some kids with autism suffer from digestive issues and constipation, and that can really increase their irritability, understandably so. But we have to know if those things are happening when we're talking about treating behavior. Escape and avoidance. Who loves hard work? Anyone? No, right? So a lot of kids engage in escape or avoidant behavior. Attention, yes, that is often the case, but we all need it, right? And so sometimes it's just about reframing the type of attention that you're giving. And then, of course, avoiding attention or, big reactions to things that you don't want to see. Access to tangibles. Can I get something for all this work, right? So what do? We work, we make money, and we buy things. It's as simple as that. Everybody does something that gains them access to tangibles of some sort. And sensory stimulation is anything that just feels good, right? So If you're a lady who loves getting her hair washed at the salon, that is just a sensory thing that you really, really enjoy. If you're a guy that likes going, fishing or going out for hikes, that's because there's something happening there that just really feels good to you. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Hello, hello. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Okay, great. So let me get back here. So what can we do? Number one, rewards do not equal reinforcement. So if you've watched any of our videos, we talk about reinforcement a lot. Applying something to a kid, like giving them a treat or giving them a toy or prize box or stars or stickers or whatever, does not mean that you're giving them reinforcement. That is a common misconception and is one that leads to a lot of delay of proper intervention and also wasted time of just an energy trying to come up with reward systems, but that does not mean you're actually going to increase behaviors that you want to see. Giving someone a prize does not guarantee an increase in desirable behaviors. So if you give somebody something because they did something good, that does not mean that they're going to do that again later. Are they motivated for that? $1 for a rich kid, so does this kid want the thing that you're offering? Do they want stickers? Do they care about prize box? Maybe, maybe not. How soon can they get it? When do I get paid anyway? Right? If you did a job and you didn't get paid for months on end, you would probably stop working until that pay came. And then you might resume working again. So sometimes there's a delay in reinforcement in class-wide systems that don't work for individual kids because, all right, well, if we all do X, Y, and Z, we're going to get extra recess time, but that is too far away for certain individuals and doesn't really mean much to them. How hard is it? I have to do what, right? So if you make a staying quiet goal for a certain individual who has a really hard time doing so, you might be, just not being systematic enough. So we have to make sure our goals are really systematic and in what's called that zone of proximal development, or ZPD, right? That it's just a step above what the child's doing now and not so demanding that it's unattainable. And again, in our SMART recommendation for IEP goals, it has to be attainable. Further reading would be motivating operations, temporal contiguity, and response effort, differential reinforcement for those 3 points. So types of reinforcement, just very quickly going to go through this. Positive just means that we're adding something. It doesn't mean it's good. I know that's often something that's misused. Even today, even though a lot of behaviors totally understand this, there are lots of people in the field of education who don't. Positive just means we're adding something to the situation. Allowance and a paycheck is a version of positive reinforcement. Bringing flowers to your partner is, and behavior specific praise. And the reason why I say that is that we can't just say, hey, good job, looks good. That's not behavior specific. We should say something like, I love how you rose your hand today. That would be really, really specific. Negative does not mean bad. Negative reinforcement does not mean that we're praising bad behavior or something like that. Negative just means that we're taking away something that's undesirable to the person that actually increases behaviors that we are looking for. So getting out of chores, right? When I brought home good grades as a kid, my mom might let me out of my chores. So she was giving me negative reinforcement, letting me out of something that I didn't want. Spring break, that's coming up next week for most of us. So spring break is sometimes a benefit to, or paid time off is sometimes a benefit to doing hard work you know that you're getting out of work later. Or take the rest of the day off, right? So it's not saying to your to your employee, like, you did such a great job today, I'm going to give you a $50 gift card. That would be positive reinforcement. Saying, you did such a great day today, why don't you head out early, right? We got it from here. You go enjoy, the rest of your day. So you're not giving them anything. They're just getting out of demands. And this is a little bit technical, but When we talk about schedules of reinforcement, like a lot of teachers I see using things like star stickers and like filling in check boxes and things like that, we have to keep in mind that there's these two different types called intervals and ratios, and that those can be fixed or variable. Ratio is for how many behaviors. So if you raise your hand one time today, I'm going to give you a star sticker. Or if you raise your hand without calling out 5 times, I'm going to give you a token for the prize box. Whatever. That would be ratio. Interval is for periods of time, just like it sounds, interval. So if you stay seated and you're quiet for 1 minute, then you get, let's say, a token. Fixed is every single time. So it's always the same. So every one time you raise your hand would be a fixed ratio, or every 2 weeks you get your paycheck, that's fixed interval. Variable would be, it's a little bit loose and we want to kind of keep it a little surprising. So every 3 to 5 times you catch this student raising their hand, they get the token or star, or that you give them access to prize box about every other day. That's a variable ratio, variable interval schedule. So here's this little cartoon of Stewie going, mom, mom, mommy, mom, 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 right? Intermittent reinforcement means it's unknown, right? Or if or when something's going to happen, right? So we talk about rats lever pressing, like if they get the cheese every 3 times, 10 times, 2 times, 70 times, you know, it's all over the place. That really keeps that lever pressing behavior on, because it's unknown when something's going to happen. Or nagging mom, right? So like Stewie here is just going, mom, mom, mommy, mom, 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 until she's like, what? Right? And that's, oh, hi, that's all I wanted, bye. So that could have gone on for however long, because sometimes mom answers the first time, sometimes she answers after 10 times. The value here is for the super surprise star. Something like that, or a surprise event, surprise token, surprise reinforcement is really, really potent and valuable for students. When you catch them doing something fantastic that is normally difficult, like let's say a difficult transition where they just, you know, put their stuff away and get lined up, where they normally would kind of fight or lag behind on that, like being really fluent and independent with something that's challenging. You want to capitalize that with something more than like the typical behavior specific praise token, whatever. You want to make it awesome. So you use something like a super surprise star that's going to give them access to a big dose of reinforcement right away. So if a child, for example, was earning, you know, up to 10 tokens for X amount of behaviors to earn a party, like a break in the OT room with the swings and stuff, that they would have a great time. Something like a surprise star would be used to say, you get to go right now. You don't have to wait until you get the rest of your tokens. Differential reinforcement means that we match the reinforcement to the quality of the behavior. Differential just means we're going to give you more potent reinforcement or better or quicker access when you are more independent, it's better, more fluent, X, Y, and Z. Something I see all too often in schools is punishment, and those are really to be avoided as much as possible, but there are still a lot of schools and classrooms that operate on a punishment system, such as if you engage in these behaviors, these bad things happen. So punishment has occurred when a response is followed immediately by a stimulus change that decreases the future frequency of similar responses. So often punishment is attempted to be applied, but it's really not actually punishing the behavior. It's not reducing the frequency of that behavior for that student. So remember that not every intended punishment is actually going to reduce behavior. Common punishments include reprimands, going to the principal's office, calls home, losing recess time, etc. Same thing as reinforcement. You can have positive punishment or negative negative punishment, such as like, I'm going to add chores to your schedule because you didn't get good grades, would be a positive punishment. Or negative punishment would be, I'm not going to give you your normal allowance because you didn't do your work. So negative punishment is often used in schools, like things like, oh, we can't have extra recess time now because everybody's just enjoying their time here in the room and not doing what they're supposed to do. So, we're not getting extra recess time today. Be mindful of ethics of punishment and the reinforcing effects it can have on teachers. So teachers sometimes have behaviors like yelling really reinforced because they get, like the mom with Stewie, they get really, really tense. And when they yell, everybody's quiet. And all of that clamor is over. And that has a really potent reinforcing effect on teachers to yell more. So we have to understand that the principles of behavior are acting on us every day. So as educators, as professionals, as parents, there's no escaping that our behavior is being reinforced and punished on a daily basis as well. And we have to be really careful and mindful about the things that reinforce certain behaviors in us as well. Behavior and stigma. No intervention should ever be more stigmatizing than the behavior itself. I repeat, no intervention should ever be more stigmatizing than the behavior itself. Never, ever, ever, anywhere, anyone, anyhow, no way, ever. Okay, we should not be applying interventions, especially punishments, to behaviors that aren't very stigmatizing with more stigmatizing interventions. And that is something that does commonly happen. So a child might be acting out in a small way, such as like eye rolling or huffing or something like that. And a teacher will get in their face and yell at them and send them to the principal's office and all of this stuff. And that is really more stigmatizing. And especially for students with learning challenges, if they're engaging in some sort of stereotypy or some sort of interfering behavior that is trying, we're attempting to reduce it, we cannot engage in interventions that lead to, counter control measures on the part of the student, or any other outburst behaviors that might occur in the environment around peers and other adults that lead to potential stigma, right? Or lack of opportunity or embarrassment for that student. We cannot have that happen. So check your interventions for potential stigma and make sure that you are never, ever, ever recommending or engaging in interventions that are more stigmatizing than the behaviors themselves. So what can we do? First, think about RTI, response to intervention. This is a really, really fantastic model. You can visit rtinetwork.org. The link is in the slide. Who uses this and for what? So a lot of teaching professionals use this. Administrations even use this in a different way, but it's where we address and even assess academic and behavioral performance of students. So it can be used for class-wide group to individual assessments, and it can be used for class-wide group and individual academic and behavioral intervention. When using a top-down model, we save ourselves from seeing blue with one student. If you've been in previous workshops of mine, you've already done this with me, but I'm going to do it with you now. Look around your room for something blue. Think about the color blue. Start looking around for blue. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and your eyes start focusing on blue. All the blue stands out to you, and your brain naturally lets the other colors kind of fade to the back, and blue stands out to you more. If I switch the color with you, which I'm not going to do right now, but if I said, okay, let's switch it to yellow, now look for everything yellow, or let's switch to green, look for everything green. Same thing, your brain would naturally attend more to those colors and the other things would fade back. This is what happens when we are becoming really narrowly focused on certain behaviors from certain students. We begin looking for those behaviors because we are either attempting to treat them and we want to be really diligent, okay. But if we are teachers in classroom and we are used to a certain behavior from a certain student, we may become accustomed to seeing it, and the treatment might become reinforcing for us. And so we have to be very, very mindful of that as well. It's really important to start fresh and to design interventions that treat the behavior so that you are not in a habitual state of looking for certain behaviors from certain students, because that's not fair and it's very cyclical. So some class-wide considerations are schedules. I mean, teachers everywhere use schedules. How much text should you use? Can you incorporate pictures? How can you prepare for transitions? So even older learners might love to see the schedule written on the board. I think that's much more common in the younger preschool, kindergarten, first grade age range. But what about third, fourth, and fifth graders, even sixth graders? They could have their schedule written on the board rather than having to look in their agenda every time they want to check in on what's next. That little bit of response effort might keep them from knowing what happens next, or they might have to get up and go to their backpack or their cubby or something to gain access to the schedule. So can we just put the text up? Can we use some pictures anyway, even if there are fluent readers in the room? Well, what if there's not? Why not just put pictures in? How can you prepare for transition? So before, during, and after, that's always the answer. What are you doing before the transition? What kind of warnings are you giving? How are you helping students to prepare? During the transition, are you reminding students of the rules by reinforcing their appropriate behavior? So, all right, guys, remember, we have 5 more minutes until we have to pack up for lunch. If you are not done with X, Y, and Z, here's what you're going to do next. If you are done, here's what you can start doing now, and giving really specific guidance on what children should do to prepare for the transition. During the transition, saying, all right, remember, we're about to walk down the hall. Everyone stay to the right. I want to see everyone being quiet. And as soon as they start being quiet, don't just start like talking to other staff in the hall or looking around or enjoying the peace and quiet. Start praising. I like how you're being quiet. I like how you're being quiet. I like how everyone's being quiet. And hopefully, if that is an issue, then you have some sort of reinforcement system for that. And after, once you get to the lunchroom, everyone did such an amazing job being quiet in the hallway. Great job. Okay. So we want to make sure that we are treating transitions, and all transitions really, before, during, and after. Reinforcing the entire group using group contingencies. I'm going to dive into these in the next couple of slides. There are dependent, independent, and interdependent group contingencies. You can use one or more of these at the same time for different behaviors that you want to increase. Apps like Class Dojo make implementing these very easy. So Class Dojo, a lot of teachers use that who have no idea of the behavioral mechanisms behind it, which is great because it's totally user-friendly for anybody. You can give the entire class a point, you can give small groups points, you can give just individuals points, you can quickly and easily write notes home. I mean, it's a fantastic app for specifically group contingencies. And having a lot of individualized care, like for the teacher to be able to individualize what they're doing with the app. So if you've explored it in the past and kind of didn't really know what to do, or you just didn't feel comfortable with it, I suggest trying again because it is a really, really good app. All right, so this is a fantastic image from Rogue ABA. Dependent group contingencies are like the hero procedure. Reinforcement for the group is dependent on an individual or small group meeting the criteria for responding. And that doesn't mean that you're going to always call the person out. It just means that you're really looking for that individual to engage or a small group to engage in certain behaviors in order for everyone to win. Like we're all in this, in order for everyone to win, that this one person has to do it, or the small group has to do it. Every man for himself is the independent group contingency. Contingency is presented to the group, and anyone who meets the criteria receives reinforcement. That's like grades, right? So anybody could get any grade based on how they do. Interdependent is the all for one, one for all. So reinforcement for the group is dependent on the entire group meeting the response criteria. So that is when we're all in this together, and we are all have to have all hands on deck and every single person be engaging in the right behaviors. And again, you can mix and blend these for different situations. So the hero procedure, one example of that is the mystery motivator story. So you write names of students on sticks, you pull 3 without saying who's pulled, but it's a hero procedure. So it is for, like, those 3 people have to be doing the right thing. Praise those who are on task by rewarding the whole class. If one of those students did not perform, you put it away and say that the whole class didn't earn without naming who failed the task. No shaming. So if you are in a class and like one student is acting out and everybody else has their heads down in a book, that is not the time to pull out the sticks, because it'd be really obvious who you're talking about and you really need to avoid that. However, if it's, let's say, cleanup time in a kindergarten and you pull out the 3 sticks and you see, okay, Katie is cleaning up, awesome, Joey's cleaning up, and Bobby's cleaning up, whoa, everybody gets a prize because these 3 people are cleaning up. And you can give everybody a heads up, like, I'm going over to the jar of sticks of the names and let's see who I'm gonna pull, because then everybody wants to get their act together because they might be the person who it depends on. And the secret is that it doesn't really matter whose names are on the sticks. You are keeping that to yourself anyway. If the person were failing, you could just not name them. So if you were really looking to reinforce a particular individual who would normally have a hard time with cleanup time, but they're doing a great job, you can like sneak in, I'm going to use the hero procedure, but you say their name no matter who you call, right? So if it's little Joey who really has a hard time cleaning up every day, but you want to reinforce Joey's on-task behavior without calling him out individually, you can use this strategy and just pretend like that's whose name you called. So that's a really good way to kind of sneak in this hero procedure for that individual, and they might feel really proud that everybody gets, you know, a marble in the jar towards the pizza party because I was doing the right thing. Independent is every man for himself. Again, like grades, token star charts, it's everybody's individual economy. You should avoid using response costs because that can be very tricky. Once value is lost, it can be hard to gain back. So if you say, oh, you're earning tokens for paying attention and raising your hand and being on task, and then the child calls out and you take away a token, that can really burn the system because the child doesn't know when they're going to lose. And it can really interfere with the value of the token, like the value of money, right? When we think about inflation, the dollar isn't worth as much anymore. Same thing, like, but in a really small economy. Why am I doing this? Why does it matter? If my tokens aren't worth anything, it's hard for me to get them. It's easy for me to lose them. So how is this going to really change my behavior? So make sure that your individual considerations, your independent group contingencies are really individualized. And we'll talk more about that when we get down to the individual point of the triangle. Interdependent, all for one, one for all, any class-wide system that engages all students for a common goal that depends on everyone's behavior. A common one is the draw on the desk. Paperclip chain, points, build a character or teachable items. So I suggested this when I was doing the virtual training workshop, that you can keep something thematic behind you, like if you're working on science, a theme of the atom, if you're working on parts of the body for young kids and learning their parts of the body, you can build a person behind you in your virtual classroom to say like, oh, I love how everyone's on mute, you earned the nose today, you know, or whatever. So that's about, you know, everyone doing what's supposed to be done. And intermittent reinforcement is a really good one for this, because when you catch, again, when you're just like catching those moments and you're responding with a really potent reinforcer, that's a really good time to do it for a class-wide. It allows individuals to participate in the placement of the point or the item part. Like that's really, really fun. If you can have a class-wide in-person build the body, or even if you're doing it virtual and you pull it up on a Google Doc or something, you can say, all right, Joey, you get to put, you know, the nose on the face, or, you know, that gives them a little bit of social opportunity to be proud that they get to do it, and also just some engagement. All right, so plan for different learners. Again, text, and or pictures. Why? Don't just make the decisions because they look cute on your board. Really decide what kind of font you're using. We also did a workshop about, really making sure that our online platforms, especially relevant now, are good for various learners, that they are able to be read and understood, and that you're not having too much text in a single box, that kind of thing. So really think about those decisions with as much nuance as you can. Reminders, songs, mnemonic devices, I love these. I use these all the time myself, right? So when I'm teaching my children or when I'm reminding them of rules, we might use something that has a little pattern to it. We use songs to remember things like the 50 states. And reminders are just good verbal cues. And especially like if it has that mantra quality where it's the same kind of cadence all the time, that can be really, really helpful for helping students to remember them and also to cue them easily, because then if they have the whole string memorized, you just have to say the beginning and then they fill in the rest and have that good reminder. Also, is there anything tactile? Is there any object manipulation? Block, sand, shaving cream? What kind of reinforcement are you using, and what kind of items are you using for the reinforcement? So what to use now? You might use Smartboard to have children like slide in their stars. You might use physical items where they're putting a piece of a puzzle in. And so make sure that your reinforcement, again, what they get to engage with if they earn, and what they're using for themselves is engaging. And when a learner presents something other than planned for, how can I support that need? Again, in the least stigmatizing way. And you want to start full class wide before you decide, oh, I'm just going to make it individualized for them. It's going to save you a lot of headache and a lot of planning so specifically for every single individual if you can fold in and go up the triangle with your considerations and your interventions. Again, like what works for one person is likely going to work for others. Using the class-wide group contingencies can occur in smaller groups. So basically within the group, you can use those dependent, independent, and interdependent contingencies. And make sure that you create groups that are not considered compatible academically, but also behaviorally. That's really, really important. I know that teachers know that already, but we have students who can sometimes help other students with their academics or with their strengths. So this one's a great leader organizer type. This one's a great public speaking type. This one's, a great hands-on person. So, and we establish those roles when we're making small groups, especially for like science labs and projects. But we also want to make sure that it's not just behaviorally, like don't put the two kids who talk too much together, but also behaviorally in the sense of what kind of opportunities are going to be available for someone who might be easy to fall through the cracks, or what kind of opportunities are going to be available for someone to inhibit their impulsivity or have patience with another person. So make sure that you're considering those things as you plan ahead. All right, so moving into individual considerations, signing notebooks, agenda books. This is just good for many students. I think this is a great practice because it shows the teacher that you have read what they wrote down in their agenda and you have time to make a little note. It could be a star, it could be a happy face, it could be whatever, or just your initials. Specific behaviors to increase, not just decrease, right? We have to make sure that when we're talking about individuals, we're thinking of replacement behaviors. That can be topographical or functional. So when I say topographical, I mean what it appears like. So replacement for hand flapping, the type of behavior that is involves your hands, and a replacement would be anything that involves your hands other than hand flapping. Functional would be, why is that happening, right? When we talk about functional assessments. So if a child is engaging in swiping things off the desk, is that for attention? Is that for escape? How can we replace that function? So if it's for escape from the task, how can we get ahead of that and say, all right, swiping is to get out of math. Let's build in a reinforcer for getting out of math. You do X, Y, and Z, you can ask for a break, or you can go take your own break and get out of it in a nice, functional, appropriate way. Remember the example of you're going to pay attention to him anyway, that awful story. You should gear it towards praise rather than redirection, positive strategies rather than reactive ones. And the old, a stitch in time saves 9, right? So if you can get ahead of these behaviors, provide the need that the child has based on the function of the behaviors, or provide redirections based on the topography of behaviors, then you're ahead of the game. You're buying yourself with compounded interest in time and energy dealing with reacting to and redirecting behaviors that are interfering with this student's learning. Behavior contracts are awesome, but you have to stick to them. So often behavior contracts are made with all the best intentions, but they fall to the wayside fairly easily once they start working. So remaining consistent helps the student to stay consistent. And if they're really mastering it and don't seem to need it anymore, it might be time to end it or to fold it into a new contract. Bridging the home and school environments, reinforce parent participation. B, reinforce the change you want to see in the world. If you want parents to participate more and you want to hear from them more, you need to actively seek out, prompt, promote their participation and reinforce it. Make it fantastic that they are participating with you. Find ways that help them feel like their participation is not only wanted, but that you value it. Make it easy to communicate with you. Don't make it difficult. Set clear office hours. Find easy ways for them to communicate with you via email or the agenda book or the notebook, the communication log. These things can really help bridge the environments and make sure that everybody is on the same page. A subtle intervention is bracelet swapping. So if I have a bracelet, like I have this rubber band here, a lot of people have those cause bracelets that say, for poverty or cancer or different disabilities or things like that. Cause bracelets are fantastic because you could have a whole bunch of them on your wrist. And if you want to reinforce an apprehensive learner who doesn't raise their hand, and you want to say like, fantastic job raising your hand, but that might actually cause them to clam up more, you can develop an individual contract with them that says, if you raise your hand, I'm just going to move one bracelet to the other wrist. That's how you know that I counted that. And at the end of the day, we'll see how many I have on the other wrist. And that's it. And if they have 0 hand raising behavior, you might want to start with 1 and say like, you'll just like watch them walk by and just do something like that. Or you'll write a little note like moved 1 bracelet today. Do something in a quiet, subtle way for a student who seems to clam up when they're given individual attention. Circling numbers on a test for testing anxiety. So students will sometimes rush through a test, right? And it's as if they're being lazy or just going too fast or trying to get it over with. A lot of that has to do with testing anxiety. They don't feel comfortable in the test and they are trying to get it over with. That's not because they don't want to do well. And a lot of students perform really poorly on assessments, even after spending nights studying. So after you do your modifying of the exam, reducing the amount of text per page, reducing the number of numbers that they have to complete, using larger text, after modifying the text for a person who needs differential instruction for their assessments, you can also consider something like that. Like tell them, okay, you and I are agreeing, you need to circle 3 questions on this test before you hand it in. And if you hand it in to me, I might say, you forgot to write your name and hand it back to you. And that's my cue to you that you forgot to circle your 3 questions. Tallies in a notebook for participation, the student can give those to themselves. So a little easy way for them to collect some self-monitoring data that's also subtle and built in, that they're not, again, being called out and giving a sticker chart. Or like there's certain learners that really don't respond well to that and can also decrease their motivation to engage in certain things. So helping them to self-monitor and make little tallies in their notebook or that you're doing in your log can also be a great way to subtly intervene and collect data. Reminders and stories taped inside. I had a student who He used to ride the bus home, and he had some behaviors that he was engaging on the bus, and we taped a reminder and a little, what would be called social story inside of his favorite novel. And so he would open it, he'd sit on the bus and open his novel, and he would look like, he's reading Harry Potter, but he was reading his reminder to himself, and it was a perfect intervention. The behaviors totally changed on the bus. Use of graphic organizers or other prompts for either academics or social emotional learning or behavior, like these are good. These are good for most people. Helping students to be the teacher. They could be the teacher to their partner. They can be the teacher to the small group. They can be a teacher to the whole class. That's not only a great way to assess, that a lot of teachers use for assessment. What can you explain to us about what you've learned? But also gives an opportunity, again, for individual reinforcement and some amount of pride and engagement in what's happening. And again, not everyone's going to want to go for that, but you can provide small systematic doses of that for students who have a difficult time speaking in front of others. So other discrete measures for providing reinforcement, think about your learner individually. What do they prefer? What do they hesitate about? What do they cringe around? We don't want to throw a big loud party with poppers and balloons for a student who has difficulty tolerating noise or sudden bursts of excitement. So we have to come up with ways to be quieter and more subtle about it, but also that is meaningful to that individual and isn't just like, well, since you don't like parties, I guess we'll just give you stickers, and when you get to the end, you can, take a walk, right? That's not individualized enough. We have to make sure that we're really, really thinking about this person and what they want and need. Okay, so your second keyword is group contingencies. All right, so let's talk about self-monitoring goals. Let me just say that one more time really quickly. Group contingencies. That's your second word. We can't repeat it after this. Okay. So some self-monitoring goals might be, will demonstrate the ability to recognize expected and unexpected behaviors, as well as rate his own behavior as part of self-monitoring. With 80% accuracy, it's compared to teacher ratings of behavior. So making sure that we can measure it, and this is a self-monitoring goal. Will demonstrate the ability to accurately recognize her level of anxiety through the use of a visual self-rating system, like a feeling thermometer. Those are fantastic. I have some clients that use these that are really, really successful. Of course, it's a little bit of discovery in the beginning, like, is this a yellow? Is this a green? I'm not sure. But once it's learned, it's a really salient way to self-identify, like, I'm in the red, I need to go. I need to go to my guidance counselor's room and have a discussion, or I need to go in the bathroom and take a breath, right? Or I'm getting to red. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting there. I'm in the orange, I'm in the yellow. I want to kind of do something else that I need to do quickly to self-regulate and de-escalate. So feeling thermometers can be really, really effective. Here's one of the ones from that IEP goal bank. You will see how many objectives are built into this one content strand, this one goal. So dealing with feelings and self-awareness, annual goal number 11. So-and-so will identify and manage feelings like anger, anxiety, stress, frustration, on a daily basis with X, Y, and Z frequency as measured by X, Y, and Z data collection. So objective 1, identify behaviors that cause others to become angry, like calling people names, tattling. That doesn't have to only occur when they do it. It can just be identifying that that is something that happens that makes other people upset. Express anger appropriately by using words or to state feelings. Ask adults for help or move away to a quiet place, like a voluntary timeout. Follow direction to take a timeout when asked by the teacher. Respond to teasing from peers appropriately. Control temper in conflict situations with adults. Receive feedback appropriately. Listen to the opinion of a peer without interrupting or walking away. Seeking help appropriately. State how his or her behavior affects others. Identify ways to ease frustration in hypothetical situations. Again, not in lifetime. Identify signs of frustrations in self. Name ways people show approval or disapproval. Describe situations in which student experiences a given emotion. Describe conditions which make the student feel angry. Distinguish between fact, rational belief, and irrational belief. Manage unreasonable fears. Whew, still going. Name alternative appropriate ways to express emotions, pleasure, anger, frustration. Express emotions appropriate to given situations. Describe feelings of mood when asked. Correctly identify emotions, happy, scared, angry, sad, from a set of pictures. If you've seen my emotion regulation workshop, I have like an immediate reaction to emotion teaching on picture card sets, because sometimes that's where the emotion teaching ends. And as you can see, there's a lot more to it. Check out that workshop if you need more information on emotion regulation teaching. Okay. Continue to maintain appropriate behavior even when frustrated. Identify signs of anxiety in self and others. That's an important point I'm going to come back to in a minute. Practice methods to reduce anxiety and stress in real and simulated situations. Use appropriate methods to reduce anxiety and stress in real and simulated situations. Demonstrate self-control as directed by the teacher in role-playing situation. Identify situations which lead to stress. Name alternative ways to handle frustration. Identify behaviors which demonstrate self-control. State a complaint appropriately. Answer a complaint appropriately. Respond to persuasion appropriately. Respond to failure appropriately. Respond to accusation appropriately. Accept no for an answer. Objective 36, say no in inappropriate, unreasonable requests. Okay, so 36 objectives in this one goal. It's really impressive, and that's an example of why I want to share that IEP goal bank, because they have wonderful lists of objectives that I think are sometimes missed and can help us to frame our goals and also put them in the context of other goals to help us think about the big picture. So the reason why I underlined "and others" here is because when we talk about theory of mind, we think about students being able to consider the thoughts and feelings of other people, but it's also of the self. And sometimes recognizing it in other people can help us learn about ourselves and vice versa. So theory of mind, a lot of the work that I'm reading also has to do with the theory of mind of yourself, like thinking about thinking, metacognition, thinking, why am I thinking this? Why am I feeling this? And sometimes seeing that happen in other people, seeing a situation play out from start to finish, can actually help you frame and put your experiences in a context. And I underlined a few of these other ones: hypothetical situations, role-playing, simulated situations. The reason I underline those is because we can contrive valuable situations that can help students deal with emotions that occur in real time. And that is extremely valuable, and I have seen it work many times, where we can rehearse their strategy that should be used when something like disappointment occurs or anxiety occurs. If we can rehearse it, then we will likely have greater independence when it really does happen. So think about ways to simulate situations, to contrive situations that could really benefit your learners down the road when they're experiencing something real. And remember to ask yourself and your teams, what does appropriately mean anyway? Okay, so responding to inappropriate and unreasonable requests. So if you ask me for $1 million, I'm not going to be like, no, I don't have that right now, right? Like, what does appropriately mean? I'm going to say, what do you mean? No. And we have to remember to prompt that kind of, value-laden language and give some variety in the expressiveness, the tone, the word choice used that matches the absurdity of the request, right? A response to failure appropriately, so make sure that you're thinking about, or persuasion, it depends on the context, right? So we have to make sure that we are not only teaching appropriate, polite behaviors, but meaningful behaviors that are matched to the culture of the environment, the culture of the family, the needs and desires and temperament of the person that you're teaching. So make sure that you are thinking a little bit hard about what does appropriately mean and why are we teaching the response in exactly that way. So just a few of our students, these are simplified goals. Again, we have to be smart about our goals. I was just writing them briefly just so that we can kind of wrap our heads around having different students in the same room. So child A in our room needs to control their temper in conflict situations with adults. So when told no, when told clean up, when an authority is interacting with them, that they are controlling their temper, when they feel like a lack of control over what's happening in the environment. Child B, use of graphic organizers or other prompts to stay on task and complete tasks independently, right? Totally different profiles there. Child C will demonstrate the ability to recognize expected and unexpected behaviors as well as rate his own behavior as part of a self-monitoring system. Child D, when given a task or direction, child will begin the task within 1 minute and remain on task for a minimum of 10 minutes independently with no more than 2 prompts. Okay. So you can have these different students in the same room, and likely you do. If you're running a classroom these days that has a variety of learners with various learning differences, or you're in an inclusive setting, more than likely, even if you are working in a very neurotypical school setting, you have extremely different learners, and you have to make sure that you're creating class-wide systems that meet all these varying needs. So how do we do that? Right? We can create, again, start from the top-down model. Think about RTI. So if you have someone who needs to control their temper in conflict situations, someone else who needs graphic organizers, well, can we have a few different group contingencies running that deal with how to answer when you're given an instruction that you find, that you don't want to do? How do you respond to no? How do you respond to demands? I think that would probably apply to a lot of students in the room who don't always follow directions, or not always compliant. Even if this is in this one child's IEP, what kind of mantras or mnemonic devices can you use for the class to help them transition, let's say, from playtime to moving on to math? If this child might have difficulty with his temper in those types of situations, perhaps being more diligent about your schedule, your presentation of your schedule, your preparation and cues when you're preparing for transition, and that would likely help everybody. Use of graphic organizers, done. Let's just use graphic organizers more often for everybody. We'll demonstrate the ability to recognize expected and unexpected behaviors. Again, it's not that you can control every little thing in the room, right? You're existing in the environment of a school setting where, there's fire drills and there's, other students knocking on the door to come in and visit the teacher, or, there's a lot of things going on that you don't have control over. But, if you have to have a student who has it on their IEP recognize expected and unexpected behaviors in the environment and in their own experiences, and help them self-monitor how they respond to those different surprises or changes, right? We can definitely have a type of mental health awareness and discussion about how we're going to treat that in the class, rather than always singling that student out. And when given a task or direction, this person will stay on task. How about you use either interdependent or dependent procedure for being on task? If this is on your IEP for a student in your room, there's no reason why you shouldn't have, the hero procedure or the all for one for all type procedure that really reinforces on task behavior. Because again, your intervention should never, ever be more stigmatizing than the behavior itself. I made a quick video on how to collect data. It's really important for your own awareness of how the student is progressing. It's also important for the students themselves and for the parents and the other staff and the administration. So let's just check this out quickly. I wrote date on top. I'm going to write 3 dates here. today, tomorrow, the next day. And a little trick in Excel, if you're intimidated by Excel, there are hacks. You can highlight 3 dates and just drag the corner down and it will autofill for you. So you don't have to write them all. So I'm just going to write, behavior to increase. In shorthand behaviorism, we use BX for behavior to increase and behavior to decrease. So if it's a behavior you want to increase, we're going to say, maybe that's not happening that much. Maybe it's happening 0 times and it's going to increase over time, given that we're using some amazing reinforcement strategies. Of course, there's some variability, even though this is just an example. I didn't want to write like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like, if it's hand raising, for example, we might say that that's going to increase over time, but with some variability. Behavior to decrease might be calling out. And so we might want to collect some data in the beginning of how often that's happening before we start treating it. So it's happening, 10 times a day. We start an intervention for reinforcing quiet hand raising, and we start tracking how many times the child is calling out. And again, this can be quick little clicks on a clicker, little tiny tallies. You keep an index card in your back pocket, you pull it out as you're circling the room, just easy to track counting data. All you have to do is highlight your data set. And then I went to the top and pressed insert, which is covered by the black bar, but you press insert, select a line. I just picked a simple line graph and there it is. And you have this beautiful visual display for your behavior that you're collecting data on. I'm going to move the chart. I press that little right click there and then press move chart to its own sheet. And then it comes down on the bottom in a new tab and it's nice and big. And you can start kind of tailoring the sheet to look like how you want it to look. And you can see there's some variability in the data. So I'm showing behaviors increasing and decreasing. But I'm going to change the title to really reflect what it is, hand raising and calling out. Then an important thing that I really like to do is add trend lines. You can press that little plus and hit trend line. And there it is. It's beautiful and it's showing us that there's an ascending trend for hand raising. And then you can just select the other one, click trend line again, and there's a nice descending trend. And so trend lines are really more important, especially when the behavior isn't so clearly increasing. So if you have greater variability, or even if it's tighter because you have a lot of dates, not just these couple of dates, but you have like, 3 months of data jam-packed, and it's kind of looking like we're not sure which way the trend is going, trend lines make it very easy to see which direction it's going in or if it's flat. So scaffolding support, when I have talked to some parents and staff about scaffolding, they say it's a crutch. Like, why should I have to build in all of this support for this student? They're going to be dependent on it and it's not always going to be there. That's not the real world. Okay, it's not a crutch. It should not be a crutch. They will not become dependent on it. The point is that we're supporting, just like when you're building a building, you create the scaffolding in the beginning and you build the building, and as it's standing on its own, you start removing the scaffolding. That's how you promote independence. Sometimes it's a cast, right? So instead of starting with scaffolding and building up from the beginning on a good solid foundation, you're actually having to do some repair because this child has already learned X, Y, and Z maladaptive behaviors or interfering behaviors, or they're already encountering some amount of learning difficulty that there's a big delay. So you have to provide a lot of support for that skill so it doesn't break down further and to help it heal, and lots of supported healing before you remove anything. But that's just a cast. It's not permanent. You don't keep that on. Just like a cast, how does your arm look when the cast comes off? It can look very, very weak if you just take that cast off, right? So we need to make sure that the muscles are building and that the independence and strength is there, right? If we are casting a certain amount of behavior or academic need, that's why it has to be like maybe all at once, a lot of support put in place. But just like the scaffold, you take it out slowly so that you know, you're fading your interventions, you're fading the reinforcement systematically as independence is gained. Most of the time, if it's done well, it's scaffolding and you put it all at once, just like I said, and remove it piece by piece until the building is standing on its own, or until your child is standing on their own and they are, you know, able to do these things that they weren't able to do before, and they are proud and standing tall and, you know, engaging in these pro-social behaviors or these academic tasks that they couldn't do before. So that's really what we want to see. So what will lead to our students' success? For teachers, professionals, parents, and students, what is found to be one of the most, if not the most important factors in success? It may not be what you think. Let's see. Okay, so, you know, I was just texted that there wasn't audio on that, sorry, but you can go see Dr. Duckworth's amazing TED Talk about grit. It is phenomenal that the research controlled for things like IQ and good looks, you know, and these amazing different variables, that even when all of those things are accounted for, that grittiness and the growth mindset is what really helps people to be very successful. And across so many populations, right? When we're talking about students, she's talking about cadets, business people, sales people. So really, I just wanted to emphasize that if it's us as the professionals, or if it's for teaching other people or other students, we have to have a growth mindset, and we have to believe it to our core and instill it in our learners and those people that we influence, because failure is not the end of the story. Failure is only one piece that really should be an indicator of opportunity. Failure should lead us to think about what we're doing and why and how we're doing it. And failure should also make us think about what we're measuring, how we're measuring it, why we're measuring it. So when we look at students failing, it's important to begin right away with that scaffolding and begin right away with expressing to them how important the growth mindset is, and how starting over and persevering and having determination long term is what's going to lead to their success. I was just thrilled when I heard this, because it's something that I tell my kids every day, that we don't accept no in this house, or we don't accept I can't in this house. Someone asked me, what about speaking another language? What if your kid says, well, I can't speak French, and they really can't speak French? I say, well, there's the power of yet. I can't speak French yet, but I really prefer I haven't learned to speak French yet. So if my child says something like, well, I can't do this, it's too hard. Whoa, no way. We don't say that in this house. You know, we can't say that. We have to teach our children that it's never about I can't. It's about I haven't learned that yet, or I don't know how to do that yet, or I need help doing that right now, before we ever even try to have that final type of fixed mindset of something that can't be done, or something that's too hard or impossible. If we want our students to grow and change their behavior and increase their skill sets, we have to be willing to do the same. And we have to fully buy in and believe in this idea of growth mindset, not just as something that we put up on the, bulletin board in the hallway, that we have to believe in the power of yet and have a growth mindset. That's all well and good, but really, truly, it has to come through in our practice every day. That a failure on a test isn't just like, well, you obviously didn't study enough. Maybe, maybe that's part of the story, but maybe this test wasn't assessing what the student really learned. Or maybe the student really didn't learn because the way that it was taught wasn't appropriate for that learner, right? So we really have to think about growth mindset in a way that is full commitment to growth mindset, full commitment to not having a fixed mindset, and teaching children that the things that they can do, or the things that they want to do, are possible, and that they can do even better and be successful in new and exciting ways every single day. And that has to come through in our teaching, and it has to be something we fully believe in order for us to be successful and in order for them to be successful. So make sure you are taking care of you. All right, we have the empty gas tank over here and the full gas tank over here. Meditate, make a few minutes for yourself. Pray, communicate. Don't be afraid to reach out to other staff, right? Reach out to your supervisor. But be prepared to discuss what you've done to provide support so far. Not only vent about a difficult time you're having, try your best to communicate in a way that promotes a positive conversation about steps that could be taken forward. Not doing so can create a negative dynamic or perception of that student or of your teaching ability. It can foster a culture of venting across staff. It can also have a bad taste in other staff regarding that student. So desire to start fresh, desire to approach your communication with your administration or other staff with a growth mindset. Remember to shoot for reinforcing and proactive strategies first. These not only provide a wealth of reinforcing stimuli in the environment for the students, but also for you. It naturally feels better to have success at reinforcing students' appropriate behaviors than to provide punishments, right? Punishments are hard to administer and can be emotionally draining. Then when you do need to, there's already been so much reinforcement in the environment and paired with you that it doesn't create or add that tailspin cycle for the teacher and the student feeling exhausted and burnt out. Advocate for change. Consider that the things that you can change within the classroom or even the school. Foster a sense of hope and a can-do spirit. And when it comes to the data, I showed you that Excel example. That was a 3-minute video and it was in real time. And yes, I have a lot of experience with Excel, but it's not all that time consuming to track behaviors that are really meaningful and important to you. And it doesn't have to be scary. You just have to take a few minutes a day. If you're not familiar with data collection systems, like start with Excel. Just say, you know, I'm gonna play with this 5 minutes before I go to lunch, or 5 minutes before I close my laptop and be done for the day. 5 minutes a day, I'm just gonna open it, take a look at it, try to track some behavior in it. And in the meantime, you know, be logging your data in a way that you can right now. The thing is that the trend can be very encouraging on a hard day. Remember I said that there's some variability there, right? Even in this little symbol icon, there's some variability, right? If we start teaching something, it's not immediate success only. There are ups and downs. And when you have that positive trend that shows that what you're doing is working, that can be so encouraging on a hard day, because you know that it's more than likely just going to come right back up following the trend. There are user-friendly data sheets. You can make them for yourself. If you find yourself writing a lot of notes, think about how you can turn that into check boxes and just make yourself a sheet that's easier to check off and fill out. Do you want to separate all of your information by student, or can you have some groupings in your data by behavior so that when you go to log behaviors, you can just quickly access them? It provides accountability for students and for teachers, right? Look at your grades for yourself. When you want to communicate to your staff, you can show them the data and it shows what you have been doing in real terms, in not just your anecdotes and your speaking, but in measurable terms of what you've been doing. It's evidence of what you've tried prior to reaching out to staff. And also it can show you that you're doing well and that you're trying your best. So it's time for some questions. Don't be shy. And at this time, the final keyword is grit. G-R-I-T, grit is our final keyword.
So excellent, Marcia. I have a couple of questions. What's interesting is I got a couple from some of my clients.
Oh. Okay.
So so I don't know. Does that mean I'm not doing a good job? I don't know. Maybe it's just my.
I don't think so.
So anyway, there are a couple of questions about the group contingencies, and
Okay.
can you give some specific examples, because it seems like the most reasonable thing for teachers to do.
Yeah, it really is. Group contingencies are fantastic. And like I was saying, they save you a lot. Like if you have some individual considerations that you can fold into group contingencies, that's really, really helpful. So some specific examples, one is just that mystery motivator, right? That you can put the sticks in the jar when you're talking about hero procedure. Another is that you're doing that hero procedure just secretly, that you're telling the students, I'm going to be looking around for for individuals to engage in quiet reading time. I'm going to be looking around, I'm going to be watching, let's see who's doing the right thing. And you know that you're actually looking for only like 1 or 2 people in your class that have that on-task behavior in their IEP, right? So you are building that into a class-wide strategy, but it's really about making sure that you're meeting the IEP and that you're, being really specific in addressing that IEP need, and that you can take those opportunities to collect data on what they're doing. Are they on task when it's told everybody do X, Y, and Z, read or do your worksheet? And when you're circling around, you can be just collecting data, if that's part, and it should be part of your IEP that you are collecting data per opportunity for X amount of days at whatever accuracy. But also, you don't only point them out. because it's on their IEP. You say, oh, I love how Bobby is doing quiet reading. Excellent job, Bobby. The whole class is getting a token or a point or a sticker. And that's for that moment. And then when you're circling around, I love how, you know, Johnny with the IEP, but you're obviously not saying that. I love how Johnny is also doing his reading. Great job, Johnny. I'm going to give the whole class a token sticker because you're doing that. So that would be in the hero procedure. And there's so many versions of that. It could be that it's earning the pizza party. It could be that it's earning extra recess time. And when I was talking earlier about that temporal contiguity piece of making sure that things are timed well, let me just back up to that. So, you know, how soon can they get it? If you're talking about on-task behavior that's difficult for somebody, you want to make sure that it's maybe built into the class-wide strategy so that, you know, they're getting acknowledgement and behavior-specific praise right away, and that's tight, right? That's tightly matched in time to what's actually happening. But if the real reinforcement for them isn't this class-wide strategy because that extra recess time or that pizza party is too far away, then you can also build into the class-wide strategy something that's individualized about that person. So if that person, let's say, needs to get up and walk around or get up and go to the beanbags to chill for a minute away from their desk, then that can be class-wide, right? If that's what they need, is to get up when they're supposed to be on task, that they engage in some type of escape behavior, getting up, walking around, and you want to redirect that to something that's more appropriate. It's not like, Johnny, you're doing such a great job paying attention. You alone have access to the beanbag chair. It's like, hey guys, whoever I find, maybe I pull sticks from the jar, and if I see you're on task, you get to crash in the beanbags over there, or you get to go hang out in the prize corner or the little library in the classroom, you know, but you're specifically designing that whole strategy around what this one child needs.
Excellent. Okay.
Does that answer the question, or do you need other?
Yeah. That definitely answers the question. It just gives me a lot to think about, but this isn't my workshop, so let me get back to the questions. So, reinforcement in school sounds great. One student that I have probably needs way more than I can actually provide. Is there anything that he can do for himself?
Yes. So just remember to hesitate on saying like that they need more than you can provide, because it sounds like you're already providing something. And that goes back to that story I told about, well, I can't be paying attention to this student every day. And if it's attention-seeking behavior and you're constantly reprimanding or redirecting, you are, right? You are providing that feedback and that attention to that child. So you clearly can, right? But you don't want to be, right? So it's about flipping it on its head and getting ahead of the behaviors. We have to think about data collection when there's something like that going on and it's like overwhelming that this one student is doing X, Y, and Z interfering behaviors that are really disruptive to their own learning and to the class. And it's like isolating me to attending to their needs and I can't teach the room, right? That's, again, that goes back to the issues we face slide. That is a lot of stress. And I just want to back it up to there because, right, that leads to the burnout. You have that one child or that one group in the whole class and you're responsible for all of them, but you really have to pay attention to that child. And there's communication with the parents and that's difficult and you get burnt out. And it comes back to that one child really demanding so much of you. And that is extremely challenging. But besides just commiserating on how, you know, challenging that is, it's really about collecting data on exactly what is happening, when, and why. So if the child is engaging in behaviors that are demanding a high amount of attention and they're escaping or avoiding demands, sometimes those go hand in hand, but it's really easy to treat one at a time. So if it's about gaining attention, then you can start by proactively, yes, giving them a ton of attention for positive, desirable behavior. And that is going to feel very annoying because I'm already having to interact with a student way too much. Why should I give them even more attention? Well, because you might be saving yourself some of that time by flipping it on its head. If the function, remember we talked about functions of behavior, if the function of the behavior is attention, that's what's like underpinning the whole thing. So you really want to feed that function in a way. You want to give that function, you want to fulfill that need in a way that works for you and for everybody else, not feed the attention in this negative capacity. So it's kind of exhausting when it's like this, right? This constant thing, and then you have that big burst of response, or if that's what's happening with them, maybe they are tolerating something and then they engage in some wealth of behavior. So we really have to avoid punishments. We don't want to go there. We want to avoid that as much as possible. Start on the proactive end. Really think about, okay, if they're looking for attention, what can I do class-wide? How can I make this more engaging for everybody? Give more feedback to individual students, but really drive it towards them, that they're getting a lot of attention. Maybe they get attention from the room. Maybe they are engaged in the hero procedure because they get to stand out and get attention from everybody. Giving, and I don't know that attention is the function regarding this particular learner and this particular teacher. But the point is that you can design your class-wide system to think about what's driving that behavior, but you can't do that without data. You need to have some type of tracking mechanism to say, was supposed to be reading quietly, engaged in, swiping the book or throwing the book or throwing their pencil or standing up and walking around, and was redirected and told to go back to their seat, laughed about it. And when you start to tease apart what's happening here, the child's probably getting out of some amount of demands and is gaining a wealth of attention for interfering maladaptive behavior. So what can we do to just completely undo that? Change the environment in a way that is feeding the need for the attention and helping them to get out of demands in a proactive reward system. Because if we can give them breaks and say like, hey, Johnny, you're doing such a great job sitting there. Let's go for a walk. Or, if you don't have other staff that can send them for a walk, hey, why don't you go, erase or do the, erase the whiteboard, or why don't you play a game on the computer or something like that, something that's valuable to that student that gets them up out of their demands because they did the right thing. If you can catch those moments and capitalize on them and start reinforcing them, you will, do that stitch in time thing. You'll be saving and get compounded interest on not having to treat the interfering behavior. And I seriously would love for that attendee to reach out to me by email, because I would love to discuss and, maybe give some more specific tips if there's a learner in the room that's really just demanding way too much of them, because that's a really tough position to be in. And of course, the motivation is to foster the best outcomes for that learner, but it can really be taxing and lead to some burnout and can lead to just some, cyclical feelings between the teacher and the student. So if they want to reach out to me, I would love that.
Oh, fantastic. And that's an excellent answer. Very thorough. Thank you. So here's this next question, which I feel like maybe you already answered. So she says, I'm a teacher in an 812, mostly non-vocal students. How can I increase communication opportunities since it's on all of their IEPs?
Yeah, right. And so like that's kind of great when you have learners who all need something similar, because then you're not having to be so tricky about folding in something into the class-wide system, because it's already something that everybody needs. So in terms of fostering communication, I'm assuming in that kind of a classroom that there are some students who actually have still some variation in what they can express, right, vocally. So a good way to start something class-wide would be mantras or cues that, let's say a vast majority of students need help saying "I feel because" statements, whether they're maybe using devices to communicate, whether they may be using text strips, or you know, a variation of different cues for vocal communication with AAC or without. It might be good to have something just up in the center of the room. And this is just an idea for something that I know is common for students who are not vocal or who have limited vocal ability, is expressing their emotions, right, in an eloquent way that is easily understood by the people around them. So you would want to make sure that some mantra-like statement, which for me, my go-to is "I feel because that's something I learned in the social sciences, and I've seen it be really effective for individuals I've worked with. I like the "I feel blank because blank" text cue. And if you have a range of students with different vocal abilities or different AAC communication devices, you can still have "I feel because" in their, either in their buttons or in their text cues or in their books, so that they are learning to use that type of language. So it's kind of framing communicative context in ways that you can prompt fluidly something for everyone. And that also is something that should be done in tandem with their speech therapist, because I'm sure that, you know, some, if not all, students in that room have some amount of speech therapy on their IEP. So you can ask the speech therapist, hey, what type of social emotional learning can I do in the classroom to foster communication and, you know, social behavior? And also, what type of, you know, self-advocacy statements are you using for so-and-so? Can we modify that or come up with some approximation about that for this other learner? And then you just have your other staff, your support staff in the room reinforcing, either with class-wide reinforcement or individual reinforcement systems, those successful statements. So if it's "I feel because" and you see a learner start to get tense, the support staff should immediately know that's what we do in this classroom because it's up in the front of the room. I'm going to tell the student "I feel frustrated" if they have a button for that or a cue for that. "I feel frustrated because, you know, broken, or because need help," or something like that. And if you can come up with approximations that are acceptable and reinforceable among the staff, then you can foster, you know, a system of communication for things like social communication or turn taking, like if you have game time and things like that. Definitely something to do in tandem with your speech therapist in the school.
That was an excellent answer. I like the collaborative component too, you know, because I think that a lot of times we as behaviorists and certainly people in schools don't take advantage of other
Yeah,
people's expertise, you know,
it's
always
true.
approaching it from our own kind of semi-closed-minded perspective, maybe.
Yeah. But there's,
So
you know, there's amazing professionals in-house, right? That's the great thing about those school settings, that you have some various perspectives that can help problem solve in-house. And that's why, again, you know, if you can have some measurement behind it when you go to speech or when you go to admin or you go to committee to talk about something, then, you know, that will really benefit you to show what you're doing and what you want more support in accomplishing.
I think that, all right, so there's one more question.
Okay.
It seems like the group contingency component of your workshop was a big hit because it says the BCBA in my class is always physically guiding one student who won't listen. This is very disruptive. Would a group consequence, I think that they mean a group contingency, would a
Yeah.
group consequence work?
For physical guidance, it sounds like there's a little more going on there in that specific situation. A BCBA individually coming into the room as a push-in, who is
So,
then physically guiding a student, is sounds like there's more going on, but I will, do you have something else to add, or I'll
Yeah,
answer
yeah.
the question?
So the way that I interpreted that question is, I like think they want to know if they implement a group contingency, is that going to improve this learner's non-compliance? That's the way that I read the question.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, let's think again about what they're doing and what function it's serving. Because if this learner is getting physical guidance, I have actually seen BCBAs in school provide physical guidance to a student who really loved physical guidance. So like that was the reinforcement. We talk about adding something to the environment that's likely to lead to an increase in behavior. That's that positive reinforcement. So I'm gonna, you know, get up and walk around and like throw books, and then this person's gonna come over and push me around and give me all this sensory input, and I'm gonna laugh about it and not do my work. That just sounds absolutely fantastic. So like the BCBA doing that, if we have some measurement to show that that is, you know, a flat trend or even an increasing trend in that behavior, that's showing that that is not effective. And also physical management, if it can only be done by the BCBA, is not sustainable to be a generalized, you know, treatment for the other people in the room when they're not around, or, you know, to the next class or next year. So it really should be treated functionally so that you can really get to the bottom of it. And yes, for sure, a class-wide contingency can help with that, because if it's about escape, you can do the independent group contingency where they have their own individualized economy. And so they get to do whatever that thing is they're doing. If it's throwing books, no, like obviously they can't gain access to throwing books for staying on task, like can't do that. But could they gain access to the gym to throw the basketball? Could they gain access to the OT room, if you have one, to bounce on the trampoline? If there's some amount of like physical exertion being displayed, that then someone's coming in to physically control that manifestation of the behavior, that shows me that we need to get ahead of it. Yes, with reinforcement systems that lead to that function being met, whether that be attention or escape or access to something, and also that we probably should resist the urge to physically control that person's body, because that could lead to counter control measures and have some increased physical interaction with that person that then leads them to use more physical control, right? And that increased intervention could actually be more reinforcing, and therefore like to undo all of that and to not have other staff who can engage in that, because, you know, physical management can really only be done by people who are trained in physical management, is just not healthy for the environment. And yes, it sounds very disruptive to the other people in the room. So I would think about getting to the bottom of the behavior, treating it functionally, and coming up with some class-wide contingencies that benefit everybody and not only that student, and then also that their individualized economy gets their function met even sooner and more precisely.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And an amazing presentation, just chock full of not only useful info, but very, very thoughtful. Thanks, Marcia.
Oh, no problem. This is my final slide. Of course, if a child does not learn in the way we teach, we change the way we teach. And that's that growth mindset for us, that we have to make sure we are able to change and adjust and pivot and grow our skill set and our toolbox to meet the needs of our learners, because it's not about them changing their neurology or changing their behavior. It's about us changing how we're teaching, what we're doing, and how we're responding to teach them what they need to learn. So thank you and good luck. And of course, here is our social media. We are on all these platforms. Here are our handles. Definitely like and follow us. We're sharing a lot of content, lots of free content. And if you find it useful, please subscribe, share, and definitely let us know if there's other topics you want us to cover, because we are really excited about the reception we're getting from these workshops. And also, it's really interesting the questions that people come up with that lead to further workshops down the line. So definitely interact with us, let us know what you think. And if there's anything that you want to see next time, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you all have a great night.